Coming up tonight, 3 American tourists walk free from charges that they violated the emergency powers. Meanwhile, the body of a woman discovered in a pond, and police investigate the circumstances surrounding a traffic fatality.
Our news is brought to you by Alive.
Welcome to Our News and thanks for joining us. I'm Jared Higgs. Topping news tonight, 3 American women walk free from the magistrate's court this afternoon after they were acquitted of charges that they violated the emergency powers by going on to Cabbage Beach during the holiday beach closure. It turns out the women had permission. 21-year-old Rana Mohammed Kanawi, 18-year-old Marian Mohammed, and 25-year-old Ikrama Kanani, all Americans from Massachusetts, were hauled before the magistrate's court where they were set to be arraigned for violating the emergency powers back on July 10th. Court documents allege that the women breached the order by entering Cabbage Beach during the holiday weekend beach lockdown without the permission of the specified competent authority. However, as the women were being arraigned, Kanawi, in the black, pleaded not guilty, prompting a group discussion between the 3 women and their attorney and amicus Ian Cargill. After that discussion, Kanawi was asked by Magistrate Andrew Forbes whether she went on Cabbage Beach on July 10th, to which Kanawi replied yes. Forbes then asked if she had permission, to which she replied yes, that she had permission from a police officer wearing khaki and named Smith. Forbes then invited the police prosecutor to refute the claim. When she didn't, he dismissed the charges against the 3 women. The charges came days after a photo of the women climbing the fence to Cabbage Beach went viral. Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis had ordered all beaches on Paradise Island, New Providence, and Grand Bahama closed for the Independence holiday weekend as part of measures to contain COVID-19. The beaches closed on Thursday night and reopened on Monday morning. The discharge of 3 young women in the Bahamas on vacation is a major embarrassment and was a colossal waste of time and resources of both the police and the courts, according to Progressive Liberal Party Chairman Fred Mitchell. He added it is a terrible image for tourism in the Bahamas and will attract international attention. According to the party chairman, tourists who visited the Bahamas because of its advertised sun, sand, and sea were hauled before the courts for enjoying sun, sand, and sea, all because of a bad decision by a singular competent authority. Mitchell added, so nonsensical are some of these emergency orders by the so-called competent authority that the government is challenged and hard-pressed to get the law enforcement officers to enforce some of them or to understand what they are. Mitchell added that the use of handcuffs and other restraints when there appears to be no violence or record of flight seems over the top and may be unconstitutional. 3 additional COVID-19 cases have been recorded on New Providence, according to Deputy Chief Medical Officer Dr. Delon Brennan. Brennan said one of those persons has a history of travel. This brings the total number of coronavirus cases in the Bahamas to 119. Meanwhile, Bahamas Air has confirmed that a flight attendant tested positive for COVID-19 on Tuesday. Managing Director Tracy Cooper said the flight attendant has not been at work since Monday, July 6. He said Bahamas Air officials have been in contact with the Ministry of Health and is following the established guidelines and protocols. The body of an elderly woman was found in a pond in the South Ocean area today. Kyle Joaquin has the story.
She's an elderly lady, appeared to be in her 60s.
The quiet area of South Ocean interrupted by police activity Wednesday afternoon as police made the grim discovery of an elderly woman's body. Police found the body on day 2 of responding to a missing persons report.
They were searching the area of a pond when they discovered the body of a female submerged. The body was retrieved and it was confirmed that it was a female.
The nearby area is quiet with only trees and the pond where the woman's body was discovered in the water. Police press liaison Audley Peters could not say whether the woman's body had any visible wounds.
At this time, we're not able to say who that individual is. We're awaiting the autopsy's report to determine the cause of death and the identification by a next of kin.
Police wait for that positive identification. Peters said police do believe the body is that of 71-year-old Alberta Russell, a resident of St. Andrews Drive in South Ocean Village.
A report was lodged to the police that she was missing 2 days ago.
According to Peters, no foul play is suspected. For Our News, I'm Kyle Joaquin.
Thanks, Kyle. Well, a 28-year-old man was arraigned on a murder charge today for the July 7th murder of Dawn Ramming. Berthany McDermott has the details.
28-year-old Richard McNeil, seen here in the navy blue Tommy Hilfiger shirt, was formally arraigned today before Chief Magistrate Joyanne Ferguson Pratt on one count of murder. While being escorted into the court, McNeil's loved ones could be heard saying freedom. The particulars are that on July 7th, while at New Providence, McNeil intentionally and unlawfully caused the death of Don Ramming. According to police, shortly after 6 a.m., a group of persons were walking through a track road on Scott Street north of West Street when they noticed a man lying on the ground with injuries to the head. Police were called, and upon arrival to the scene, they met the body of a dark male with gunshot wounds to the head. Emergency medical services personnel pronounced him dead. McNeil was not required to enter a plea and bail was denied. He was represented by attorney Ian Cargill. Now, McNeil was remanded to the Bahamas Department of Corrections until October 14th, where he will return to court for service of a voluntary bill of indictment. Reporting for Our News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
A woman was killed when two cars collided on Blue Hill Road last night. The two vehicles, a white Nissan Skyline and a teal Nissan March, received extensive damage, according to police press liaison officer Audley Peters. Evidence suggests that speed played a factor in the fatal incident.
Shortly after 9 p.m., police received reports of a traffic accident that occurred on Blue Hill Road, south of St. Vincent Road. Officers responded, and on their arrival, they met a white Nissan Skyline and a teal green Nissan March that collided into each other. A closer examination of the scene revealed that the passengers in the Nissan March needed medical assistance.
EMS personnel were called to the scene and pronounced one of the female passengers of the Nissan March dead. Peter said the victim appears to be in her late 40s. Last night's traffic fatality comes days after a man died in a traffic accident on Exuma. Peters had this warning for drivers.
We're encouraging members of the public to exercise the due care and attention, because a hurry is not a reasonable excuse to speed on the roads of New Providence or in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, because there are speed limits within which we must drive our vehicles.
Still to come on Our News, the opposition reacts to government's admission that some tourists slipped in without proper COVID tests. Stay tuned. The government's admission that some tourists managed to slip into the country without the correct COVID-19 test isn't sitting well with Angleton MP Glenys Hannah Martin. She spoke with Gillian Gray.
With 10 positive cases in Grand Bahama in just a matter of days, opposition member Glenys Hannah Martin is concerned about the healthcare system on that island. She said if cases skyrocket, it will be a disaster.
The hospital there, part of that is a tent. It would be an absolute disaster. The risks are so high, the stakes are so high, that we have to put in place the strictest of protocols and ensure that we protect the population, and particularly those who are peculiarly at risk.
During a press briefing on Tuesday, Dr. Merceline Dalregis said some of the new cases on Grand Bahama are a result of Bahamians traveling to the United States. Hannah Martin said open borders means the Bahamas will be open to risk, and added that to minimize that risk, ports of entry should have strict measures that are enforced. She was taken aback by the tourism minister's revelation that some people came into the country without the proper tests, noting that other Caribbean nations have looked to alternate countries for tourists like Canada or Europe, where cases aren't skyrocketing. Hannah Martin said the tourism ministry should continue to analyze the market.
We may not have to go that drastic mile, but I think that it does require analyzing and scrutinizing and making decisions, because the risks are very high. Now, if we have very strict protocols at the borders, then even out of Florida, you narrow the risk. But we've heard that some of those protocols were not strictly enforced, and as a result, as in the minister's words, people slip through the cracks.
With cases on the rise in the United States, Hannah Martin said Bahamians who want to travel abroad should think again as they run the risk of bringing the coronavirus back to the Bahamas.
I can't judge why people travel, but if it was to go to Walmart, it's not worth it. Florida is making new records almost repeatedly. And so I think that Bahamians traveling should think twice unless it is absolutely necessary.
Hannah Martin also took issue with the emergency measures. She said she understands why the measures are in place, but the issue comes when those protective measures are not consistent.
I think we have abided by the orders, we've abided by the protocols, we've abided by the sacrifices, we've been locked down for 5 days, we've done all of that because we want to protect and procure good health in our country. But I think when you see inconsistencies, when you see sets of rules for one group and not for another, when you see rationale that doesn't make sense, then you run a risk of undermining the larger objective.
Reporting for our News, I'm Jillian Gray.
As COVID-19 cases continue to rise on Grand Bahama, that island's minister says residents should take part of the blame, as many of them are not following restrictions put in place by the government. Kwesi Thompson added many returning from abroad are unheeding calls to self-isolate.
There's still too many businesses that are not ensuring that their patrons wear masks. We still have a number of complaints with persons who are returning home, and these residents who are returning home, Bahamians and residents returning home, and not complying with the quarantine regulations.
With 3 more cases confirmed today, Thompson said Grand Bahamians must not sit around and wait for government to take action.
What I think is necessary is for residents to do what they can and what is in their control, which is when they go out in public to wear their mask, to ensure that they have their social distancing, to ensure that they continue to maintain the hygiene, to continue to wash their hands. Those who can and need to remain home, let them remain home. If you do not have to travel internationally, do not travel internationally. If you do and you come back home, ensure that you abide by the quarantine regulations.
The new school year will look a lot different for students in September, as Education Minister Jeffrey Lloyd says it is unlikely that the entire student body will be on campus at the same time. Education officials are set to make their final decision on a new format later this week, but Lloyd said it is likely students will return to the classroom in shifts.
What we call a blended or a shift circumstance, where from a part of the day or part of the week, some students, and another part of the week, some part of the day, other students, those who would be otherwise out of, as it were, the instructional classroom would then be transported, we expect, hope, to a care center, still under the supervision of the Ministry of Education.
According to Lloyd, while the shift system is only one of 3 options, it is the most likely. Other models include 100% virtual schooling or the regular school system where everyone is on campus, which Lloyd said does not encourage social distancing and is unlikely.
The middle model, which I have just described, the blended model or the shift system, is the one that more than likely we are going to choose to go forward. Those plans are being finalized this week.
When our news comes back from the break, the DNA leader raises concern over the arrests of 3 tourists. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The leader of the Democratic National Alliance is expressing concern after 3 tourists were arrested for an alleged emergency powers violation. George O'Bain reports.
3 tourists being hauled before the courts for attempting to gain access to Cabbage Beach during the Independence Weekend beach lockdown is the result of mixed messages from the competent authority, according to DNA leader Arinthia Komolafe.
They come to a very long weekend in the Bahamas only to find that they're not going to be able to patronize the very thing that they came for, which is the sun, sand, and the beach. And so again, it's very confusing, the messages that our competent authority is given. It shows obviously that there's really no logic or basis or real basis behind the decisions that they're making. And I think it's rather unfortunate that those tourists had to be faced with that.
While expressing sympathy for the women, Komolafe said she was shocked by the Minister of Tourism's admission that tourists have slipped into the country without proper COVID-19 testing.
To hear that person slipped in, we also heard yesterday in the press conference that there are actually persons that either took the wrong test or used fraudulent documentation to show that they actually had a negative test. And that was very concerning as well, because what it shows is there's been a breach in protocols, obviously. And in our statement, we had actually indicated the fact that there has been a bungling of this reopening. And that is quite evidenced by the fact that we've had this surge.
With the spike in cases on Grand Bahama being attributed to trips to the United States, Komolafe said widespread testing is needed more than ever.
We must not rest on our laurels. I was saying that at the minimum we should be aiming in the earlier days for 10% of the population, which is 40,000. And if we only have 10,000 kits now that have been donated, and so far we've carried out just under 3,000 tests, not on 3,000 persons, 3,000 tests. So it's less than 3,000 persons. We should be setting strategic goals to say where we want to go. So we say by the end of August, we want to have carried out 20,000 tests, by the end of September, and so on and so forth.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Georgie O'Bain.
Still to come, the Basketball Federation announces a new initiative, so stay tuned. The Bahamas Basketball Federation announcing a new initiative as the sport prepares to resume locally. Marcellus Hall has more.
While this arena has not been used for its intended purposes over the last few months due to a number of different reasons, whether it be Dorian or COVID-19, it seems as if basketball could be on its way back. Members of the Bahamas Basketball Federation and the local leagues coming together today to let everybody know basketball is on the return. It may not be business as usual, but the Bahamas Basketball Federation is making plans to move forward with the sport. Some new challenges, according to President Mario Boleg.
The Skills Challenge is a new competition that has been brought by FIBA since the pandemic came about. And with the Skills Challenge, the Bahamas is proud to announce that we will be entering a U17 boys and girls in the Skills Challenge competition. We will be representing the regions of America. We don't know how our first competition will be yet, but I think by next week we'll have those information. And this is a qualifying for us to be able to qualify to play in the World Cup Skills Challenge.
Junior national coach Marvin Henfield will oversee the new Skills Challenge as well as the junior programs.
We will commence registration for athletes will open tomorrow, July 16th. Athletes and their parents will be able to go to the BBF website, which is www.bbfbasketball.com. They can go ahead and register. Registration will close on July 23rd. And then once registration closes on the 23rd, we will notify all of the athletes on the 24th.
Meanwhile, Boleg adding that everything will be done under the strict guidelines imposed by FIBA and the Ministry of Health.
The Federation has drafted a letter to the Ministry of Youth and Sports, who would then receive authorization from the higher powers, the government, which to ensure that we have all the protocols meet the standard before we commence play of these leagues. We have met the standard that was set by FIBA, which is the international body for basketball, which is the same standards that the NBA has to follow coming the end of the month when they start their season. We do believe that if we decide to allow funds, once approved again by the government and the authorities, that those funds will be marked and then it will be a limited amount, and the spacing, how they seed it, will also be adhered to.
So good news for Hoops fans. Basketball is on the way back. I'm Marcellus Hall for our news.
Thank you for joining us for Our News Tonight. To catch Our News on the go, download the Rev Go Play app. On behalf of the entire news team, I'm Jared Higgs. Have a beautiful evening, Bahamas.